Hey there, I'm Kurt Dudley with RealmIQ. We're here promoting our RealmIQ sessions with some excerpts for LinkedIn and YouTube. In this session, I'm talking with Jennifer Stivers. This was a great conversation from actually the most popular podcast in season 1. Let's listen in. But what were you doing in December a year ago when you discovered this new software?
I feel very lucky about where I was. Right place, right time, I think. I was contracting at Coursera. And so that's just a good place to be in terms of somebody who is surrounded by smart people and who's interested in learning. So my job there, my contract was specifically marketing, partner marketing, and anything that I did or was involved in was purely human generated content. Granted, the leadership there did recognize when ChatGPT entered in such a public way back in December, and they made it clear that they saw it as transformative, and allowed us to participate in experiments with different technologies. So nothing to do with anything that I put out there public facing or that was part of my job. It was just a nice place to learn.
Yeah, so what was it that they gave you pilot projects to experiment with, or take a normal job or project and see how it could run through an AI LLM to see what the results would be, just to play around with purpose, as I say.
I'm not 100% sure on what I can talk about externally, but they just allowed us to experiment with different tools and in a guided fashion. So,
Okay.
there was nothing again that I did that was part of my specific job or that was external facing. And
So what,
then
how do
when
you how
my
do you feel about that duality of work done by a human versus work that's enhanced by AI, that's corralled and orchestrated by a human?
that's
That's
that's where the ethics comes in, right?
right.
That fascinates me a lot. It
Okay, I
really
know you're into
fascinates
AI
me.
ethics. So how do you deal with that as a creative, as someone who realizes there's problems with ethics and AI, and like what are the discussions you're having, or what do you advocate?
I advocate think before you act.
Okay.
So I think it's something that it's here, right? So everyone, it's going to impact everyone in some fashion or another. But I really encourage people to learn more about it and to understand the pros and cons of it and to really think about the implications before they uh, put something out there public facing, like a homemade chatbot, for example. Um,
Yeah, there's you can create your own GPT now, but in terms of working within an organization, I think what you're implying is that you should be cautious about what you enter into any LLM, because it ends up being public and you don't really
yeah,
know where this information is going. So you probably shouldn't put in your company's prospectus into the system and, like, hey, write this better, or your Q4 earnings, and can you make a table out of this for me? Right? I mean, it's really try to be as generic as you can in your prompting, so there's no proper names, there's no names of companies or brands necessarily in what you're entering. Is this the advice you're giving, as to be on a pathway towards, at least within the confines of corporate structure, how to use it in an ethical way and not destroy the company's IP?
yes, definitely. That's a huge element of it because once you put in proprietary data, you don't know exactly how that's going to come out. So that's one aspect of it. The other is, after I left after my contract ended, I continued to take some formalized courses and then just experiment with the tools on my own.
Mhm.
So some things that might not seem so obvious to people, I would think it through all the way in terms of what are the implications of it.
Yeah. Mhm.
So prior to working with generative AI tools, like you, I've been involved in the creative process. So it would normally involve hiring a graphic designer, going through a lot of editing before something has a logo put on it and it goes out to the world. Also, if any content was generated, it would be human created and you could stand behind it that way
Mhm.
ethically.
Mhm.
So I also have run audio ads in the past where I hire a voiceover and run those campaigns. So all of a sudden I'm in a world where you really don't need to do any of that. And I struggle with what that means.
Yeah, right.
So I
Well, I
seek
mean,
out.
you being empowered as a creative amplifies what were obstacles for you before, or not necessarily obstacles, but steps in the process that you had to outsource and pay for, your client paid for them. And it could either be cost prohibitive or, many other factors enter into how to execute on a creative campaign. And now here you are, specifically in voiceover. Let's talk about that because I use AI voices for many things, to voice my blog. I put them in promo spots, and when I'm listening to them, I'm looking for it. Does it sound authentic enough where people it's not discernible? People wouldn't say, "Oh, that's so AI," right?
Mhm.
But I'm surprised at how realistic it is. I mean, the samples are human, right? So it's just about the interpolation of your script back out into the world. And there are controls, that you can, emphasize words and put in pauses and work with it, right? Just like you would work with a voiceover artist. Like I remember, the famous line I used to use, like, give it a little smile, right? What does that mean, right? It's like, oh, just uplift the innocent. So prompting becomes the same thing, if you're generating it through a prompt. But if you're just literally feeding in a script and manipulating the words, there's are some surprising results, and that are, what, I'm using it. I'm sorry, but I have friends that are voiceover artists. Forgive me, Matt, that I absolutely love working with, but in a crunch, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. Is it ethical? It's ethical. I mean, there's nothing, it's not using a celebrity voice, right? and using it in a wrong way. It's like, no, these are supposedly voice actors that were perhaps sampled, given a persona in a library, and were have generated themselves as voice avatars. So I don't think it's an ethical issue. It's a dilemma of creatives. It's like, am I never hiring my friends the voiceover artists again? Those are dilemmas, but I don't think it's an ethical dilemma. What do you think?
I've been educated a bit more about it just because I went to a talk in San Francisco with some panelists that were from leading AI voice technology, voice audio companies. That was a really interesting panel to listen to because the ethics were discussed in terms of permissions, and there was a healthy discourse back and forth of musicians, voiceover folks in the audience asking questions. um, I didn't know that voice was something that doesn't have the same copyright as faces or likeness.
Likeness, yeah.
So so that's a battle that seems to be happening now, is the ability to own your own voice and to give consent for how it's used.
Yeah.
So there are different companies that approach it in different ways. At the particular time of the talk, the script had some specific rules that I liked, which was you had complete ownership of your own voice. You could gift it to somebody else to tweak for the workflow, but the ownership could only belong to one person. And that one person needed to be alive. So if you think about things you've seen, there are documentaries you've seen probably where it's narrated by somebody who is no longer living.
Yeah.
So each provider has its own rule. So that's where the ethics kind of come into play, where you can look at it from, on the one side, if you're a voiceover actor, you could think, okay, if I use a voice clone, I can reach a broader audience and have my voice translated in languages all over the world and have a broader reach.
Yeah.
Or you could think, I've heard from some who say that the connection of a human voice is how they connect to people, and they don't want their voice ever synthesized.
Yeah. And that is
So I guess
that is the category, synthetic media.
Yes.
Is that a term that you've heard in these discussions? Because I like the term. It gets away from avatars, gets away from artificial, and I think it more accurately describes what we're talking about. It's synthetic media, but it presents it in a positive light, because nomenclature is important, and nomenclature helps adoption and removes the scary element. And if it's admittedly synthetic media, you can be upfront with that. You're not trying to really fool anybody. You can say, I use synthetic media. Now, how that's tied to an original voice or anything like that, I know there's lots of issues around that. And certainly the Hollywood strike, the actor strike, even though I think it was actually settled today or signed, it's an ongoing concern about the use of likenesses and who owns what, who owns the capture, and it brings up a lot of ethical issues around rights, celebrity rights. But even, character actors don't want to be replaced, even though, it gets into the whole special effects category, because, if you watch Lord of the Rings, the Battle of Minas Tirith, it's like, yeah, most of those soldiers in that great battle were all CGI. So they didn't necessarily take away jobs from, because they were never going to go shoot that in a big field with 1,000 actors. So it was all digital. And so Hollywood's been doing this for years. It's like using technology around CGI to help tell stories in a more cost-efficient way. Keep looking for more RealmIQ sessions on your favorite podcast channels. And thank you to our sponsor, Ovations with a Z. Ovations is the first online platform to simplify the talent finding and booking process for virtual events. Go to ovations.com, that is with a Z, and there you will find a variety of speakers, including myself. And if you're a booker, use the promo code CURT5, that's CURT number 5, and get a 5% discount for booking any speaker, including myself.
RealmIQ. Book your corporate AI workshop today.
CurtDoty.co. Branding, marketing and product development.